Hi, my bestie. How you doing? I wanted to come on and do a video today about wounds. I want to start off by thanking you guys for yesterday because I was really struggling with one of my wounds and I needed to work through it. And, you know, my guides, my intuition, my higher self told me to go to my soul tribe. So that's what I did. And I have a really hard time asking for help. I have a really hard time because in my past, whenever I asked for help or support or emotional support, it was not met with compassion. It was not met with acceptance. It was met with anger. So I still really struggle to ask for help because it's programmed into me that when I ask for help or support, I'm going to get hurt or I'm going to be punished or I'm going to be made to feel like I'm doing something wrong asking for help. And that shouldn't be, that's not how we should be. And that's not how we should approach people asking for help. You know, that's an unhealthy way to approach people asking for help. So it was actually really hard for me to come on yesterday and ask for space to just process something with you. But I cannot tell you how much it helped me. I was kind of a mess for the rest of the day, but I woke up feeling different this morning. So I just wanted to say thank you for giving me that space to talk about what I was processing. And what I was processing is a wound about silence and feeling like I need to silence myself or being afraid to speak up or being afraid to ask for help. Anyway, it helped me tremendously. But it's interesting because last night, you know, when you process emotions like that and when you process trauma like that, it's very triggering. And for some strange reason, you know, you all know that I have a moderator because there are a lot of unhealthy people that I would call keyboard warriors. So people who sit behind the screen, sit behind the keyboard. Some of them enjoy poking at people and triggering people. Like some of them find enjoyment in it. I've personally known people who have admitted that they enjoy doing it, getting a rise out of people. Surprise, surprise, those people aren't in my life anymore. I've outgrown those connections. But you all know that I have a moderator. And so I never really see the amount of that negativity or the amount of unhealed people that there are that I'm triggering with my light. And for some reason, last night I almost feel like it was a bit of self-sabotage, or maybe it was, spirit guiding me to it. But I ended up I never go on my YouTube. Like if you guys have YouTube and you're a creator, which not all of you are, but you have an app that kind of simplifies it. But you can't see deleted comments, you can't see people that you've hidden. And, a lot of people online need to protect themselves from that hatred because it can get to you. Actually, just last night I was on YouTube and this woman popped up and she used to make fitness videos. And people were asking, where did she go? Where did she go? So she made an announcement explaining where she went. And now she actually designs clothing, fitness clothing. But in this video, she explained that she just couldn't take the hate online. And she shared some of the comments that she would get about her body. Very hateful, right? Very negative, because she was triggering those people. She was triggering them. I didn't think there was anything wrong with her body, and I don't feel like we should be making those kind of comments about anybody's body. Like, again, I feel like it came from a place of envy within them, their shadows. But anyway, so I don't know why, but I wandered onto my dashboard. And for some reason, I was drawn to the hidden comments or the comments that are held because they're inappropriate. I know, not a good idea. It was like, again, I was processing everything. I don't know why I did it. I don't know why I did it. And at first, when I looked at the comments, it was like, oh my gosh, like some of these people, the things they say, the things they feel they have a right to say, to someone creating online, it just boggles my mind. But what I noticed is that it didn't trigger me in the same way that it used to. So I looked at some of them. Your affirmation, I do not need anyone else to make me happy. That is the truth. Your happiness lives within you. Anyway, I wasn't as triggered by these comments, but I noticed a huge amount of comments about, it was like I talked about yesterday. It's like I've been mentioning, I'm dealing with a wound of silence, which stems from my childhood wounds. Anyway, I noticed that a lot of the comments were people, trying to silence me. And I see that in other creators' comment sections. And this isn't about me bringing attention to the negative comments or feeling like I need to justify myself. It was almost like exposure therapy. Like, it's almost like my higher self led me into that. It was dark in there. It was really dark. Some of the comments, it was dark, negative energy in there. But it's almost like it was a little bit of exposure therapy for me. Like, I looked at the comments and I survived and I didn't let them get to me. Anyway, but I just wanted to thank you for yesterday. But I thought today I would come on. You guys are right. I'll post that other video when I feel ready. But I thought I would come on and talk about mother and father wounds, specifically today, because a lot of us spiritual beings have them. I believe a lot of spiritual beings came to this life to heal trauma, came to this life to heal generational cycles. I know that's why I'm here. It's interesting because in my family, my sister doesn't have kids, and she still really struggles with a lot of wounding. And I honestly believe in the black sheep theory, that there are some of us who are made to be that black sheep and break away from that trauma and heal it in our bloodline. I truly believe that. I've seen it in my children. My children are sometimes, because my children are older, when I tell them about my childhood, they can't imagine. They're like, I can't even imagine having a childhood like that because theirs is so different. But would their childhood have been different if I hadn't broken the cycle, or if I don't continue to break the cycle? And that's why I'm passionate about what I do. And it's why I believe in healing. And the reason it comes up in love readings is because often, if you have trauma, if you have mother wounds, father wounds, you can attract people with the same energy or patterns that you went through with your parents so that you can heal them. So I wanted to come on and talk about mother and father wounds because when we are, again, it's not about holding resentment against our parents. And a lot of parents don't want to hear, they don't want their kids to share what they went through as a child. A lot of people who are cycle breakers, when they talk to their family about their trauma, they get the, can't you just let it go? Like, why are you hanging on to that? And I had it much worse than you had. So this isn't about blaming our parents. It's not about holding resentment against them, because I did that for a very long time. I blamed my parents for anything that was wrong with me, and I was resentful. Especially when I went no contact with my family, I was very resentful. But through healing, I've released that resentment, and now I don't carry that weight with me. Yesterday, when I was having my breakdown in the morning before I filmed that reading, I said to my partner, it's not easy being the one that came to this lifetime to heal. It's lonely, And it's not about, I spoke about it in a reading a little while ago. It's not about breaking up families. It's about saving mine. Like my family with the family I created, with my partner, with my children. I chose them. I chose myself. I chose my healing so that trauma wouldn't be passed down. And my family wasn't ready to heal. I'm also going to read about the throat chakra blockage, because a lot of people that have mother and father wounds do struggle with throat chakra blockages. I see it a lot in the love readings I do, that someone has a blocked throat chakra. And what I'm realizing in my readings, there's lessons to be learned from the connections we have. Friendships, love ships. There's lessons to be learned. There's lessons to be learned from these, especially love connections, that can help us to heal. Instead of just repeating the pattern, I'm seeing that card about, until we are conscious of our shadows, we will continue to hurt others, which is a love message in one of the decks I use. And until you heal it, you are going to repeat the same pattern. You are going to call in the same type of person. You're going to keep accepting less than you deserve, or you're going to keep running. But anyway, for me, I want to read the throat chakra blockage just because for me, and I feel like for some of you, you've mentioned it, that the fear of speaking up, the fear of setting boundaries, the fear of sharing your voice is an important one to heal. And that's something that I'm going through right now. I also wanted to mention something else, just to talk about it. It's not that I feel like I have to justify myself. It's not bringing attention to this comment. But there was one comment that really stood out to me, and I spent a lot of time journaling about it and reflecting about it. And it was triggering. It wasn't triggering me emotionally exactly, but it was triggering that wound of silence, that wound of, you're not allowed to make noise. And it had to do with my dogs, oddly enough. So it was someone saying, again, I'm not here to justify myself. Sometimes when I talk about these comments, I'm using it as a way I feel like there's a lesson in everything, or sometimes people like that mirror back to us the things we're working on. And again, oddly enough, I'm working on this wound of speaking up about emotional abuse. And so anyway, this comment, out of all the comments on there, this is the one that really made me reflect. And it was somebody telling me that they loved my readings, but that they had to say something. They finally had to say something about my dogs. And I'm not going to quote it or anything because honestly, I just looked at it once and it made me like go into deep reflection. And I'm not going back to that, like, I'm not going to go back in there. I'm not going to go back into that hidden comment section. Oh my goodness. No, thank you. I don't want to be around that energy. But there was one comment that stood out to me about my dogs barking. And it was somebody telling me that I needed to silence them. And what wound am I working on? So it was someone with, again, this isn't about justifying myself, but it's a reflection of why I don't silence my dogs. It's not that they're, like they were talking about dominance and being the alpha, and you have to have dominance or you have to assert your alpha or they're going to feel like they're the alpha. And it was all just like, blech, you know? Actually, that's an outdated belief. That is an outdated view on relationships with dogs because that was based on wolves. And domesticated dogs aren't wolves. Anyway, again, it stems from this silencing thing, right? So this person telling me to silence my dogs and telling me that it's because I never told them no, or I never asserted my dominance. Therefore, they run the household. I'm not the alpha, which is completely, first of all, I couldn't give a rat's ass who's the alpha, you know? But anyway, symbolically, it made me think of how society, our parents, want to control us, want to silence us. Negative people want to silence us from speaking our truth, or unhealed people. So symbolically, I was making a connection. Because again, I see connections everywhere. I'm also, the idea of being autistic. I am autistic. And one of the things that autistic people have is pattern recognition. So I see patterns in everything, which has been magical for my spirituality. Again, I'm still not convinced that... I heard a rabbi talking about it once, about how he believes that neurodivergent people are just highly spiritual and not meant for this world. So actually, I know I'm getting off topic. Actually, by spiritually awakening and learning to heal and accept myself, it's helped me with some of my autistic traits. Anyway, so I've been around people who had this mentality that they needed to dominate their dog and be the alpha. And what it looked like was a dog that looked like it was being controlled. And the owner looked like they liked having that control. Look at me. Look at how my dog listens to me. Look at how he obeys me. I am his master, And I just wanted to share my relationship with my dogs because I view my relationship with my dogs quite differently. First of all, dogs are animals, and animals are supposed to make noise. Dogs bark for many reasons. Dogs bark because they're anxious, because they're bored, or they bark because they're in a protective energy. Some of these people who think we need to dominate our dogs, I would rather have the connection I have with my dogs than the connection they have with their dogs. Like, I was around someone once who had that dominance alpha over their dog. And their dog, wasn't allowed to sit anywhere but on their bed, on their mat. They weren't allowed on the couch. They weren't allowed this. They weren't allowed that. It was like... I saw that dog as like a little conditioned dog who wasn't allowed to be a dog. And my connection with my dogs are much different. Energetic, hang on. I just recorded 5 minutes. I can't remember where I've started that 5 minutes, but it was silent. So I'm going to say it again. I won't be silenced. Anyway, I think I was describing my connection with my dogs. But anyway, my connection with my dogs, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating some of this because I can't remember where I left off before it went silent. You know, I have a very loving relationship with my dogs. They're not badly behaved because they're barking. They're barking, they're not barking out of anxiety. They're not barking out of fear. They're barking out of protection. And dogs are supposed to bark. Animals are supposed to make noise. But anyway, I have a very beautiful, I didn't get a dog. Again, I apologize if I'm repeating things, but I didn't get a dog to have control over it or dominate it, just like I didn't have children to control them or tell them who they should be, control who they love, those types of things. I got a dog for the relationship with a dog, the connection with a dog. I also got them when I was at a point where I was lacking love, like self-love, and I felt like something was missing in my life. But, you know, my dogs, I also believe dogs, pets are soulmates, and I don't want to dominate my soulmate. Did I mention the autistic thing and pattern recognition? I have a point about all this. So like my dogs, they sleep in my bed. I spoon my dogs. I cuddle them on the couch. I love my dogs. And they're very loving dogs because I showed them love. I'm okay that they don't feel dominated by me or scared of me. I grew up like that. I don't want to inflict that on anyone. But my point is like my partner used to joke about how our animals have always been very loving. Our dogs have always been very loving. And he would say that's because of all that love you poured into them when they were puppies. Because when they were puppies, I did give them a lot of love. Because, you know, and I know they say that's the perfect time to train puppies, which I train them enough. But I also poured a lot of love into them. I snuggled them, I held them, I took care of them. And that was ingrained into them, that was programmed into them. The same way trauma can be programmed into us, so can love. But anyway, and the connection that I see, the connection that I'm trying to make, is that when we are children, we're all born able to read energy. We're all born intuitive. But when we're very young, we're very impressionable. We're like sponges. We absorb everything. We absorb energy. And I mentioned, before I realized it was silent, I mentioned, you know, the movie Fly Away Home, where they're talking about the geese and how the baby geese, when they're born, they will imprint on the first living thing they see. They think that's their mother. And that's kind of what happens to us. You know, we absorb what we're seeing in our household. So if there's trauma in the household when we're very, very young, it becomes deeply ingrained in us. It becomes programmed into us. And it affects us for the rest of our lives until we heal it. It affects our self-esteem, how we talk to ourselves. Like if your parent talked down to you, you probably struggle or struggled, if you haven't healed yet, with a negative mindset or negative self-talk. If you viewed an unhealthy dynamic in your household between your parents, possibly you found yourself living out that dynamic or attracting in that dynamic in friendships, in work situations, in love. It's why I feel like part of the reason I do love readings is because there's lessons to be learned from what we accept. There's lessons to be learned from who we attract. We can take those lessons and turn them into empowerment. And that's why people who want a quick fix don't like me. And that's all right. I'm not their reader. That's totally fine. But I wish I hadn't lost that part, because now I feel like I'm missing saying something that was important. But anyway, that's why I'm reading about mother and father wounds. Because even if you're not holding on to resentment, even if you say, my parents did the best they could. Your parents were probably, if you suffered through trauma as a child, they probably suffered through trauma and it was passed down. Even through pregnancy, I believe you can absorb trauma. Like, I believe that baby in the womb can absorb that trauma from what's going on. They can hear. They could probably feel their mother's energy, right? Anyway, so I wanted to talk about it because, again, even if you don't hold on to resentment, the way you were raised, the trauma you went through affects you long term. It affects you for the rest of your life. I remember my mother-in-law said something once about someone. Said something about someone and said, well, they're just a toddler, so hopefully they don't remember that. They won't remember it. It won't affect them. I call BS on that. I call absolute BS on that. Anyway. So, mother and father wounds and the blocked throat chakra is what I want to talk about. So, just for me, I grew up with in not such a healthy household. Were there good times? Yep, there were. But there were also traumatic times. And it really did affect me long term. So I'll just mention a few of the things. But, I grew up watching a very unhealthy dynamic between my mother and father. So, my father could be quite angry, quite reactive, and mean at times. And as a child, I knew that I felt bad for my mom as a child, watching how he treated her sometimes. And then I watched my mother never put up boundaries or never stand up for herself and walk on eggshells and things like that. So right away, that was programmed into me that if someone's mistreating you, you have to stay silent. You have to take it. I inherited things from both of my parents like that. There was a narrative that I couldn't be loud, not even if I was happy. If my sister and I were making too much noise, it would anger my dad, and there'd be doors slamming, and the energy would just be like, I could read energy, like, I'm mad at you and I'm not talking to you because you were being too loud. Like, that's what his energy was saying. my sister and I would often be told when we did something wrong that we were a failure and that we were stupid. I still struggle with the word stupid. It still strikes a chord in me. So, just as an example, if you're told that you won't amount to anything and that you're stupid and that you're a failure, that affects you for the rest of your life until you heal it. So I for a very long time had that negative limiting belief programmed into me, where I was always putting myself down inside, or I was always telling myself, I'll never be able to achieve that. I might as well not even try. I'll always be a failure. I don't have a future. And I'm sure if you know what that feels like, that's hard to live with that negative self-talk constantly in your mind. And somebody put that voice there. I grew up in a time where spanking your kids was normal. Like, physical punishment was normal. Or maybe that's what I believed as a child. I don't know. Was it normal? In the 80s? Mid-80s? I don't even know. I could never imagine smacking my kids. I just couldn't imagine what they would have to do for me to hit them. Like, I just can't. Anyway. But again, that affected me long term. I wasn't allowed to ask for help. If I asked for help, I was punished. If I had feelings, I was punished. I remember, this is a memory that I did a meditation about. So one of the things I talk about is imagining yourself going back to a traumatic situation when you were young. You observe the situation. You sit down by the childhood you. As they're going through this traumatic event, you whisper to them that what your parent is doing to you is not your fault. It comes from an unhealed place in them. You are worthy. You are loved. You deserved better. You're safe. And then you walk them out of that situation. So I remember it was programmed into me that if I cried, I was a baby. So it made me suppress my emotions. It made me feel guilty for ever crying or having feelings. I didn't feel like I was allowed to have feelings. I wasn't allowed to speak. I could speak, right? But not about anything that wasn't surface level. I was also undiagnosed autistic. So I would have meltdowns. I would have difficulty with food textures and not want to eat. I was punished for some of my autistic traits, like stimming, echolalia, where you vocal stim. I was punished for things that now I know were autistic traits or ADHD traits. And again, they didn't know. They didn't know that's what it was. My mother has apologized to me. She apologized to me earlier this last year about how she didn't know. She didn't know those things were autism because, of course, a lot of people, especially from that generation, don't know what autism looks like because they thought it only affected boys, right? There was this doctor who was swearing, and everybody listened to him, that there's no way girls can be autistic. So all the studies were done on boys, and boys present differently when it comes to autistic traits than girls. That's another story. my awakening started when I started really noticing the trauma that I inherited. And my kids were, I think they were all under the age of 3 or 4, all 4 of them, 2 sets of twins. And I started noticing that I was like acting like my dad a little. I was starting to, again, I was starting to notice some of the things that were unhealthy about me. And my whole awakening and healing journey started because I was actually feeling really overwhelmed. You know, I had 4 kids under the age of 3 or 3.5. And I felt like I had no family support. And I would see people who had grandparents that were really involved, and family that were really involved, and I felt like I was kind of drowning. And even now I hear my dad's voice in my head, which I'll get to in a minute. I felt like I was drowning. So I messaged my mom and my sister, and I told them, like, I'm really struggling, and I would really appreciate some help with the kids. And again, I can hear my dad in my voice. I didn't think it was their responsibility to help me. I'm the one that chose to have children. I know, Dad. I know. But I thought, and it was so hard for me to ask for that help, because anytime I asked for help, I was punished, or I was made to feel silly for needing help or inadequate. So I asked for help. And the response I got was very defensive. It was like, after everything we've done for you, after all we do for you. I'm not going to go into the dynamic. I didn't think that they were very involved. So I mustered up my courage to ask for help. And I was met with punishment. My dad started sending me these emails. How dare you ask for help? Who do you think you are? And like in a very mocking tone. Oh, I'm Kelly. I have such a hard life. I went to Florida. I have such a hard life. Poor me. Like it was traumatic. And I was basically disowned for asking for help. And that's what triggered my awakening and my healing journey. But again, I think these things are important, and it's why I talk about them, right? And I really, as someone who struggles with this wound of silence, we really need to stop telling people to be quiet or to change things about them that are part of who they are. You know? I take great comfort in, I know that if my children have done it. They've told me, Mom, when you do that, it bothers me. I could never say that as a child to my parents. No. You know, once my son told me, I prefer driving with Daddy because you're kind of scary when you drive. And if I had said that to my dad, I didn't get defensive. I said, I really appreciate you telling me that. And then I stopped driving the way I drove. Like, I used to drive quite aggressively, like my dad. I'd be terrified for my life when I was in the car with my dad. And a huge part of my healing journey, and I think it should be part of everybody's healing journey, is reparenting yourself. You know, when my kids are going through something or they come to me wanting to tell me something like that, I pause and I think, if I were them, how would I want my parent to approach this? You know, when Wally was sick, my son Elliot was just beside himself. And he kept apologizing. Like he came to me crying. And he said, I know I'm being a baby. And it was like, I can see how they inherited my trauma. I've never told him he's a baby for crying. But he had this fear of looking like a baby and being too emotional and crying. And, you know, I said, you never, ever have to apologize for having emotions. You never, ever have to worry about looking like a baby. I said, emotions are normal. Emotions are healthy. You cry. And I'm sure you guys know what it feels like when somebody tells you not to cry. It's like it makes it more intense within your body when you try to control that. That's why when somebody cries around me and they're okay with hugs, I give them a big hug and I say, let it out. And it's almost like by saying that, and my partner does the same thing for me, but it's as if by saying that, it gives that person, it makes them feel safe to really release that. And trying to hold that in it doesn't feel nice. So part of my reparenting myself is when I'm being harsh on myself or I'm in an unhealthy situation, I think, if this was my child, what would I do? You know, someone mistreating me, I think, if this was my child, would I be okay with them treating my child like that? And the answer is no. And then I say to myself, then why is it okay for them to treat me that way? And that helps me heal my inner child. I sure do love to talk to you. I'm so silent sometimes, but not with you. Anyway, that's just, you know. And I mentioned it the other day, or I mentioned it in that reading that I will post, and you're right, I'll know when it's the right time to post it. I would see some pretty traumatic stuff happen in my house. And it would be like the elephant in the room. Nobody would address it, you know? And I was expected to wake up and go to school the next morning and pretend that nothing had happened. And I'm hearing spirit say to me, or this is my belief, that a lot of our wounds stem from mother and father wounds. That's where they come from. So it's almost like that's where you need to start, right? Is the trauma you've experienced as a child. And it really is worth healing. Mother wound. Just because you didn't receive unconditional love doesn't mean you were unworthy of it. The mother wound is a deep imprint. Oh, I said that word with the duckies, or the goosies. The mother wound is a deep imprint left when the love, nurture, or validation that should have been freely given was absent, inconsistent, or conditional. It forms in the spaces where you were unseen, where your emotions were dismissed, where love felt like something to be earned rather than something you naturally deserved. This wound manifests in self-doubt, difficulty receiving love, people-pleasing, or a lingering sense of unworthiness. You may find yourself seeking approval, fearing rejection, or struggling to trust your own needs because the one who was meant to show you unconditional love left you questioning if you were ever enough. Healing the mother wound is about becoming the mother to yourself that you always needed. It is about unlearning the belief that love must be proven, that your needs are too much, or that you are only worthy when you are perfect. And I'm sure just by hearing this, some of you can hear how this is what you've attracted in connections, right? Where you feel like you have to people please. Not just love connections, or you feel like you have to prove yourself. Or you're filled with self-doubt. You may find yourself seeking approval. I am in tune with my inner self. That's your affirmation. And it's 218, which is so perfect because 2, High Priestess, your inner wisdom. 18, the moon. Again, your intuition. Shadow work. I see magic everywhere. Where was I? You may find yourself seeking approval, fearing rejection, or struggling to trust your own needs because the one who is meant to show you unconditional love left you questioning if you were ever enough. Healing the mother wound is about becoming... Oh, I'm repeating myself. Whoopsie. You do not have to carry her pain. There we go. I went way back. You do not have to carry her pain. You do not have to repeat her patterns. You are allowed to nurture yourself, to meet your own needs, to give yourself the love that was withheld. When you stop looking for the love you've never received and start being that love for yourself, you break the cycle. You step into your own wholeness, not as someone waiting to be chosen, but as someone who finally chooses themselves. So if you don't, if you have this mother wound, you are probably looking for love outside of you. You are probably looking for someone to give you that love because you don't know how to give it to yourself. Maybe you struggle with, I see it a lot in, especially the divine readings I do. Think about it. Divine counterparts are meant to help you heal these wounds. They're meant to trigger all of these wounds so that they can be healed. So maybe you're someone who always wanted to be chosen, or you always wanted to be felt chosen by someone. Choose yourself. If you are hoping that someone chooses you, that is a sign that it's time to choose yourself. Journaling prompts. And again, journaling, it may seem simple, I'll just write down these questions and answer them. But it really allows you to reflect on these. Again, very important. How did my relationship with my mother shape my ability to receive love? Do I struggle to nurture myself? And if so, why? What unmet childhood needs do I still seek to fulfill in my adult relationships? Have I ever mistaken self-sacrifice for love? Guilty. Me. Do I fear emotional closeness or cling to it? So you can even see some of the dynamics I talk about in my love readings. You can see how they stem from a mother wound, like someone who fears emotional vulnerability, or someone who anxiously attaches, right? What messages did I receive about my worth from my mother or maternal figure? Again, if you tell someone, if you have a baby, right? And you tell it every day that it's a potato. I don't know why I'm saying a potato. You say, you're a potato, you're a potato, you're a potato. You're not a human, you're a potato. That kid is going to grow up telling people it's a potato. Why did I use a potato as an example? I don't know. You know, if you grow up telling your kids that they're loved, that they're special, that they're safe, that they're loved, that they're special, that they're safe. You are loved, you are loved, you are loved, you are loved. They're going to grow up knowing that they're loved. I have a very gifted child. I know they're intuitive. And I tell them all the time that they're magical because I don't want them to lose that magic. It's something that it's something I wished my mom would have told me instead of telling me that I was like, oh, that's make-believe. You know? So I tell my kid every chance I get, you're magical. It's interesting. The other day, I had a nightmare. Like, I had a really bizarre nightmare. And I was telling my kid that. I was like, Ellie, I had this really weird nightmare. And they were rocking in their rocking chair, stimming. And they said, was there this in it? And I said, yes. And was it about this? And I said, how did you do that? It knew they're non-binary. They knew exactly what my dream was about or my nightmare. And I didn't tell them. And I was like, you're magical. You know, I never wanted my kids to be afraid to come to me because I was terrified of my parents. I was terrified to ask for things or to tell them how I felt, and that's not what I wanted for my kids. And, you know, because of that, I believe that's the reason that my kids were so open to me about, you know, I have 2 kids who were not afraid to come to me and tell me that, I mean, they were nervous, but they weren't afraid to come to me and tell me that they felt different. You know, they came to me and told me that they didn't feel like that they identified with their gender. And I believed them. But I think about how different it would have been if they didn't feel safe to come talk to me. Anyway, where was I? Have I unconsciously repeated my mother's patterns in my relationships? And that's what I was talking about. Maybe you watched your mother stay in a bad situation or not be able to put out boundaries or accept less than she deserved or whatever. Are you acting the same pattern out? How can I reparent myself in a way that nurtures the parts of me that were neglected? So for me, having kids helped me reparent myself. It was very healing for me to parent my children in a very different way. But that's why I mentioned, you know, I started showing up for myself in the ways that I wished my parents would have. Or I started thinking about things, you know, when I was being hurt by someone or when I was being too hard on myself. Even my Ellie, the magical one that I talk about, even they have, like, my kids are very emotionally mature and I'm proud of them. But, you know, there was one day where I was having a bad day. I believe in showing our kids that we are not perfect and that we go through struggles too. So there was one day I was crying and I apologized. And they said, "You don't need to apologize, Mommy. You're allowed to have your emotions." But when I'm being hard on myself, I think, would I treat my kid this way? That's helped me reparent myself. Or if you don't have kids, you can say, would I treat childhood me like that? What does true unconditional love look like to me, and do I believe I am worthy of it? How can I heal my relationship with the maternal energy within myself? Mother wound, a deep emotional imprint formed from an unfulfilled, strained, or complicated relationship with the mother or maternal figure, often affecting self-worth, emotional regulation, and the ability to receive love. This wound manifests as difficulty nurturing oneself, seeking validation from external sources, or struggling with feelings of abandonment, rejection, or conditional love. Some may feel emotionally distant from their mother due to neglect, criticism, or enmeshment, while others may carry resentments for unmet childhood needs. There may be an internalized belief. There may be an internalized belief that love must be earned or that vulnerability leads to rejection, making it difficult to trust relationships. Emotionally, this wound can create cycles of self-sacrifice, people-pleasing, or avoidance of deep connection. Physically, it may manifest as heart chakra blockages, digestive issues, or tension in the shoulders. Over time, an unhealed mother wound can result in struggles with self-nurturing, codependency, or in difficulty embracing one's own femininity and intuition. Watch for patterns of self-criticism, fear of emotional dependency, or feeling undeserving of conditional love. Suppressing the mother wound by either rejecting all maternal influence, denying the need for nurturing care or emotional closeness, or overcompensating by seeking motherly validation in unhealthy ways. Some may emotionally shut down, distancing themselves from love and affection as a defense mechanism, refusing to acknowledge past pain while unconsciously repeating inherited emotional patterns. This can manifest as hyper-independence, avoidance of deep relationships, or rejecting feminine energy altogether. And this all shows up in my love readings. That's my point. Where am I? Some may suppress this wound by taking on the caretaker role, always prioritizing others while neglecting their own needs. Guilty. I've gotten much better. Watch for patterns of rejecting nurturing energy, fearing intimacy, or feeling unable to express emotions freely. Beneath both extremes lies the same longing to feel seen, loved, and nurtured in a way that feels safe and unconditional. What are you eating? What are you eating? Funny story. Do I want to tell this story? I kind of do. So I did that video on addiction, and I noticed some people say they had food addictions, or an addiction to food, which very hard because I don't want to speak on that too much because I need to learn more about it. But I have a very addictive personality, and I do become very addicted to certain things so that it feels like I need it. I also, at one point, 2 points in my life, I struggled with 2 different types of eating disorders. But anyway, that's the food that I'm addicted to coming. And my dogs are barking to let me know. They're communicating. Barking is a form of communication. They're barking at me to let me know something's here. You know? Anyway. What was I saying? So I've developed this... I become quite addicted to things. And right now, my food addiction is macaroons, which people pronounce macarons. I cannot pronounce them that way because there is a person in my life, used to be in my life, on my partner's side of the family that saying macarons brings up a bad memory. So I say macaroons, even though I mean macarons. But my partner, like, it's become an addiction. I'm being vulnerable here. It's become an addiction. Like, I can feel it's an addiction to them. So my partner ordered some. I found a place that makes really good ones. And my partner ordered some. And they ran out of packing material and there were snowstorms, so they couldn't get shipped. And I was becoming obsessive about it. Where are these macaroons? Where are they? Check the tracking. Where are they? Where are they? Where are they? And I was feeling like this addictive side of me come out. And I ended up ordering a lot of macaroons from some other place. I've never tried them before, but they make them in bulk for people who are having parties or have cafes. So anyway, I said, just watch. They're going to show up on the same day the order that you made shows up. And that's what's happening. They're all showing up today, and I don't even want to, I will tell you how many there are. Do you care to take a guess? My stomach's grumbling. What are you eating? Do you want to take a guess? Do you want to use your intuition and guess how many macaroons I have arriving today that I don't need? Your time is over. I'm embarrassed. It's 204. I didn't mean to. But that addictive side of me was like, it came from a very, oh, they just got delivered. I just got a notification. It came from a very like codependent place in me where I was like, I need those macaroons. I need them. I don't care where they're from. I don't care that they only sell them in bulk packages. I need them. Like I should have just been patient. But yeah, I do struggle. Well, I don't struggle with necessarily, again, everybody's experience is different. For me, that's how it manifests for me. But it like becomes unhealthy and I start hoarding them. Like a squirrel, like an ADHD squirrel. There. That wasn't so hard to admit. All right, father wound. The father wound is so deep and so... Just mentioning something about my dad. You know, I'll always have that hope that we can rebuild things, but this is a pattern in his life, probably learned from one of his parents, right? That's how I have compassion for my parents. You know, sometimes when I was holding on to resentment, I would imagine my mom as a little girl and what she went through from her parents. And that made me feel more, it allowed me to feel more compassion and less resentment because she was programmed. But my father is very stubborn. And once he cuts somebody off, that's it. That's it. I've watched him do it my entire life. I watched him do it to his brother. So while I'll always have hope that I can rebuild that bond, I'm also aware that part of his pattern doesn't allow him to rebuild bonds. The father wound is so deep and so all-pervasive in so many parts of the world that its healing could well be the most radical social reform conceivable. The father wound is not just personal affliction. It is a cultural and societal issue that ripples through generations, shaping how we view power, authority, and ourselves. When a father figure fails to show up emotionally or physically, when they withhold love, praise, or validation, we are left with a profound sense of inadequacy. This wound tells us that we are not worthy of protection, guidance, or unconditional love. It influences how we show up in relationships, how we measure our self-worth, and how we navigate the world. This deep sense of unworthiness can spread into other areas of our lives, leaving us feeling disconnected from our own power and potential. Healing the father wound is not only about reclaiming the love that was never given, it is about transforming the narrative of how we see ourselves and the masculine energy in the world. It is about breaking free from the unconscious patterns passed down through generations and rewriting a new story of love, strength, and support. Healing this wound is the key to accessing our true power, to standing tall without the need for validation, and to creating healthier relationships. When we heal the father wound, we begin to heal the world, dismantling the old systems that keep us trapped in cycles of insecurity and self-doubt. The world shifts when we heal the core belief that we are not enough, and in that shift, we reclaim the fullness of who we are. Journaling prompts. What was my relationship with my father like, and how has it shaped my sense of self? Do I seek external validation in ways that stem from my father's influence? How do I react to authority figures, mentors, or male role models? Have I internalized any beliefs from my father that no longer serve me? You bet your butt I have. Do I struggle with self-discipline or structure? If so, why? In what ways do I either seek approval from or reject father figures in my life? What emotions surface when I think about my father's presence or absence? How do I define strength and support, and has my father's influence shaped that definition? What would healing the father wound look like for me? If I could say anything to my father without fear, what would it be? The father wound. I've decided I'm going to save the throat chakra wound for the next one because I've already spoken a bunch. Upright meaning. Oh, sorry. This has a deck of cards as well. I always read both meanings. So this is how, like the upright meaning, two people could have the same father wound, but one of them undercompensates and shows up this way, and then the other one overcompensates and shows up the other way. A deeply embedded emotional imprint left by an absent, neglectful, emotionally unavailable, or overly critical father figure. And it's funny because, like I said, I can see the connection in love readings, how that masculine, right, who the feminine attracts, who can be neglectful, can be emotionally unavailable, can be overly critical. This wound manifests as struggles with self-worth, difficulty trusting authority, or the inability to feel supported in life. There may be a lingering sense of unworthiness, a fear of failure, or a subconscious belief that love must be earned through achievement, control, or self-sufficiency. Some may develop patterns of seeking approval from father figures in relationships. So maybe what you're seeking in a love connection is what you were seeking from your father, right? While others may reject authority altogether, resisting structure or discipline. Emotionally, this wound can create challenges in feeling safe, secure, or guided, leading to cycles of self-doubt, hyper-independence, or seeking validation from external sources. Physically, it may manifest as tension in the shoulders, digestive distress, or issues with grounding and stability. Over time, an unhealed father wound can result in difficulty with commitment, struggles with self-discipline, or an internalized belief that one must prove their worth. Watch for patterns of overworking, seeking external validation, or mistrusting support from others. Suppressing the father wound by either rejecting all forms of authority and guidance or overcompensating by becoming rigid, controlling, or emotionally detached. Instead of acknowledging the pain, some may adopt an extreme stance of self-reliance, believing they must do everything alone and refusing to trust in leadership, support, or mentorship. This can manifest as rejecting structure, resisting guidance, or fearing dependence on anyone else. Others may go to the opposite extreme, over-identifying with the role of the father, taking on excessive responsibility or feeling the need to control outcomes to ensure stability. Some may suppress feelings of resentment, convincing themselves that their father's absence, neglect, or criticism did not affect them, while unconsciously repeating the same patterns in relationships. Watch for signs of struggling to accept help, viewing vulnerability as a weakness, or fearing emotional closeness with male figures. Beneath the resistance lies the same core wound, the need to feel safe, guided, and worthy without conditions. And again, I hope that you can, I see that connection where these dynamics are exactly the dynamics that show up in relationships, especially in the soul contracts that I channel. And it's why I talk so much about the healing, so that you can empower yourself and learn from it and heal that wound within you so you no longer attract that type of energy. And that the person you're connected to does the same thing. And if they don't do the same thing, then you outgrow them. Heavy. So, my friends, thank you for sitting with me. I enjoy doing these readings. I feel really called, I've felt really called from spirit to do more of these shadow readings. So I will look at the blocked throat chakra next in the next reading. I'm just wondering, the reading that I haven't posted yet is about the gaslighting wound and the narcissistic abuse wound. And I'm not saying that you were with a narcissist, but if you were, as a child, if your parent had narcissistic traits or in a connection, you were connected to someone, a friendship, a workship where there was narcissistic traits, even if they're not a diagnosed narcissist, the effect on you is the same. And it can be quite damaging. So we can have, I talk about this in my reading, I have compassion for people with those traits. It comes from a place of wounding. It comes from a place of programming. Like I said, when we're kids, imprinted onto us, they watch their parents be that way. They imitate it like a little parrot. But it's still damaging for the person on the other end of it, especially if they are unhealed and don't know how to choose themselves. So that's what that reading was about. And now when I mention that reading, I don't have the same trauma response. And I think that is, oh, that's sad. I think that's because of you. My partner just told me that Catherine O'Hara passed away, the mom from Home Alone. Do you know that she did the voice of Sally in The Nightmare Before Christmas? When I heard that, I was like, my mind is blown. I can't handle this information. Oh, she passed away. That's sad. Anyway, so yes, I'll do the throat chakra blockage one. There's also a solar plexus chakra blockage. Maybe I'll do chakra blockages next time. Yeah, I'll talk about chakra blockages. But yeah, if there's like attachment wounds, broken trust, chronic anxiety and fear, chronic guilt and shame, chronic stress and burnout, codependency, cognitive dissonance. That's a good one. That's something that that's a wound that you develop from the gaslighting and the manipulation. Control wound, creativity blockage, cynicism, despair, devaluation, ego dissolution, emotional repression, envy, existential despair, external validation, family of origin wound. Maybe I should have read that one with this one. Fear of being perceived, fear of change, fear of failure, fear of success, fear of the future, forgiveness, humiliation wound. Like, there's just so many ones in here. And again, knowledge is power. Like, this book has made me understand myself. It's been life-changing. Everybody always asks. Sacred Shadows by The Reckoning Co. Also has, you can get a deck on Etsy, but it's just needing to focus on shadow work. Maybe we should do that. Anyway, any of the ones I mentioned, if you want me to do a reading about it, I will. Not a reading, a hangout sesh. Anyway, I bought myself, when on Halloween, when I was wearing that cheer beer, oh dear, no beer for me, cheer bear hoodie. Well, that night, my daughter stole it from me. She didn't steal it. She asked if she could wear it, and I was like, okay. But then I never got it back. Anyway, I'm getting myself another one so that I can do some readings with it on. Anyway, I love you guys. And again, thank you for yesterday. I struggle with guilt accepting help a lot. That's something that I was struggling with. Maybe I need to read The Guilt and Shame Wound. But again, it comes from a place where I was afraid to ask for help and I was shamed if I asked for help. So now when someone helps me, I feel guilt. I'm working on it. There's lots of things to work on the healing journey. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you again for yesterday, because I needed my soul tribe, and you guys all energetically supported me. And that means, I come from a background where I can't even get that from my family. So imagine how it felt to have all of you just, like, I just felt surrounded by your energy in the most beautiful way. So it means a lot to me, and I'm sending you guys lots of love and light, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.